This is the Tom Anderson Show, broadcasting live from the KVNT studios, 7 to 9 a.m., Monday through Friday.
Dinesh D'Souza is undoubtedly one of America's most laureled filmmakers and authors by the conservative, the patriotic right, perhaps most notable as a political commentator. Some might even say he's become America's sentinel or perhaps the conscience of the United States. He has a new documentary released today on DVD, Will America Succumb to Identity Socialism? You can find out more about that. You can purchase it. TrumpCardTheMovie.com is the website. We'll put that in the post, in Facebook, and in our YouTube video when we upload this. Welcome to the program, Dinesh. How are you today?
I'm doing great. Looking forward to being on the show.
Absolutely. Well, now you heard me attempt to give you a title of stature, sentinel, arbiter of conscience. What would you label yourself?
Well, I thought of myself for most of my career as a writer and speaker, but now I'm probably known best as a filmmaker. And Trump Card, my new movie, is the 5th political documentary, and I think my best one yet. So I'm very excited about it. It couldn't be more timely.
Sure. Now, Trump Card, let's get into this idea of a division. We hear, those of us certainly in talk radio, whether you're talking with Limbaugh or Hannity or me regionally, you know that there is such a polarization going on, and we're even seeing it in poll results. Wall Street Journal recently saying, Biden's up 14%. The more conservative polling centers say, no, it's actually much less than that or not at all. We see rioting. We see all the different elements, and I think you allude to that and get into that in your documentary, not so much polling, but what's happening in identity socialism. And would you say that the public gets it? Would you say that these documentaries maybe encourage them to research it a little more?
Yeah, I think that this division runs pretty deep in society, and it's the reason I call the movie Trump Card is it all revolves around Trump. But I don't even think it has much to do with Biden. He's kind of a cardboard figure, and even the people I think who are voting for Biden are sort of voting against Trump. So Trump represents something about himself and about America, and I think the great divide today is all over that.
Yeah, I would agree. If you look at the differences, where would you say historically this came from? Because I've listened to you, certainly in the national media centers, discuss whether it's white versus black or male versus female or straight versus LGBT or, legal versus illegal. These are the themes that literally permeate my show pretty much every day because it's the headline news. And would you say there's a demarcation? Would you say there's a time where this started, point certain, or would you say it's been an evolution, kind of a creepy crawly event over the last 3 decades?
Well, this is the history of it. In the 1920s, there was an Italian communist named Gramsci who made a very profound point. He said that the reason that there had never been a Marxist or socialist revolution is because the working class had been culturally corrupted by the church and the family and the rhetoric of patriotism. So what he basically said is the capitalists own the culture. He said, we leftists have got to take over the universities, take over the schools, and we need to indoctrinate young people in the opposite way, in the doctrines of socialism and racism and so on. So I think this doctrine was sort of adopted in the 1960s, and there was a massive effort by the left to take over the organs of education, but also of media, and it's been massively successful. So that today, the left has these giant megaphones of academia, the media, Hollywood, Broadway, even the music industry, and they're able to deploy that to put out all kinds of propaganda that we are sort of helpless against.
You talk about redefining the American dream. When I think about success, of course, humanity, life, a safe family, those come to mind. Then I think about where I live, maybe neighborhood, certainly business, commerce. Am I able to save money? Those are kind of the rudiments for me, living in Alaska, white male, middle-aged. But as we look at other epicenters, problems right now, whether it's in Minneapolis or whether it's in Chicago, or look at right now Portland over the last month and the horrors there and the rioting. This change in what the American dream is scary. It's certainly scary to me, and I can point out states where I have friends: Nevada, Arizona, Texas, New Jersey. They have the same apprehension. What would you say? I know there's not a panacea, but is there a way to slow this down? Is there a way to prevent it? Is it purely Trump getting reelected? Is there any remedy to this? And how can we as Americans help change the mentality?
Well, I think that the most important thing for Republicans to do right now is to toughen up. And I say that because I think the left recognizes that we have been the party of the nice guys. And so a lot of their lawlessness and craziness is based on the idea that they can do stuff to us knowing that we would not dream of doing it to them. They can pack the court. They know we won't pack the court. They can knock down our statues. They know we won't knock down their statues. They can deploy the deep state, the police organs of government, the FBI, the CIA, the DOJ against us. They know that if we come to power, we would never think of doing the same thing to them. So the bottom line of it is they feel a sense of immunity in being able to bend the rules, recognizing that two are not playing at this game. We won't do it to them, and as long as we are sort of the namby-pamby party, they will keep doing it because their aggression is paying off.
We're talking with celebrated filmmaker Dinesh D'Souza. His newest documentary, Trump Card, can be purchased at trumpcardthemovie.com. What's at stake? The American dream is at stake. That's I think the message, the underlying message. How long did it take to make this documentary? I mean, you're becoming a veteran. You're probably the most notable for the right in America. And I'm assuming that it's not overnight that you can perfect the documentary. How long did it take?
Well, typically what I do is I write a book first. So I published a book about a month or two ago called The United States of Socialism. And that, I think, lays out the destination for the Democratic left, because a lot of the craziness, a lot of the things they're doing, those are the means. But what is the end? What is their goal? Well, I think their goal is the United States of Socialism. And so I lay that out in the book, and then the book provides the sort of intellectual background for the movie. A movie is very different than a book, because a movie is a story. It's not an argument. It's an emotional narrative. I like to have humor. I have the audience, frightened at times, but I also then have them moved and inspired. So ultimately, it takes about a year from start to finish. The biggest challenge is being able to sort of anticipate what issue is going to be important a year from now and beyond, and cook up a script and a movie that's going to be relevant when it comes out.
If someone were to look at Genesis, your first very popular, very successful financially and with notoriety documentary, and they were to watch each one, would it tell a story in sync, or are they categorically different, or would you say, no, they mesh together? Maybe not like a part 1, 2, 3, 4, but do you think that they coincide enough if they began with the first? And of course, Trump Card is the key, but would it give insight, do you think?
Oh, absolutely. I think that all the movies are a sort of, it's almost like looking at a succession of tapestries, in the Vatican Gallery. One kind of blends into the other and deepens the argument and the point. So the Obama movie was really mainly just about Obama and what his background is and what his father believed and how he got his dreams from his father. And then I began to get into the history of the Democratic Party. I dealt with issues of racism. My movie America affirms patriotism. And then this movie takes sort of the biggest topic of them all, the widest canvas, which is socialism. And when I say socialism, I want to emphasize it is this identity socialism, meaning it's a merger of classic socialism and identity politics. It's about class, but it's also about race and gender and sexual orientation and immigration. This is the type of socialism we're dealing with now.
We have Epicenter, certainly the folks that listen to us in Alaska, parts of Canada, but we have other states with an online presence, Washington, Oregon, they're left of center, and yet it's an enclave. There are enclaves of Republicans there, and I know many of them, and either they're serving in office or they're trying to run. They're certainly promoting documentaries like yours. When we come back, we have another quick segment with Dinesh D'Souza. We'll talk about how he is branding this across the nation and how is it resonating. I think it's going to be a huge launch, a huge success. Trump Card coming out on DVD today. You can go to trumpcardthemovie.com to get more information. Purchase. It's a great Christmas gift as well, and it definitely ties in with the current presidential election. Coming right back with Dinesh D'Souza on The Tom Anderson Show.
This is the Tom Anderson Show, broadcasting live from the KVNT studios, 7 to 9 a.m., Monday through Friday.
Celebrated filmmaker Dinesh D'Souza with us, his newest documentary, Trump Card, exposing what's at stake, the American dream, folks. You can get it at trumpcardthemovie.com, and you'll see that in the link on our YouTube video and on Facebook as well. Dinesh, how could someone follow you? I know they could purchase your books. I mean, you're on my bucket list. I'm a huge fan. Rick is. So many people are huge fans. You wouldn't even know it. You maybe feel a buzz on your skin as you pass us by. And we're like, that's Dinesh, the great Dinesh D'Souza. But I mean, all joking aside, how would you... I know they can go to trumpcardthemovie.com, but I mean, are you getting into a purchase newsletter in the future? Certainly Facebook and the social media mediums, but how would someone continually follow you so they know what's next on your agenda?
Well, if they go to my website, which is just DineshD'Souza.com, they can find out about my books and movies. They can sign up for my email newsletter, which I do send out, or just go on YouTube. I've got lots of videos of my debates not only on politics, but also about God and Christianity. So I'm all over social media, and there's many different ways to find my stuff and just get a good sample of what I'm all about. And then the books, I think, are probably my most kind of in-depth statement of what I think. But the movies are in a genre of their own, and they all, if you watch them in sequence, it's quite an experience, and I would say also quite an education.
No, absolutely. You know, and on this show, we've had other intellects, the Gorkas, and now Dan Bongino has his own show, and Eric Metaxas has been on. Michael Knowles, nice young man. Charlie Kirk has just joined the Salem Radio Network, now nationally launched yesterday, and so we're happy to welcome him on the network. But in your case, you may be the most formidable debater, certainly of their ilk. Is there anyone that you've had a tough time debating over your last 10 years of these forums and debates nationally?
You know, I would say that my most difficult opponent was the atheist Christopher Hitchens, and we had debates that were very, they roved between culture and politics and religion, but he was a very, he was a kind of an Oxford debating style guy, Mr. Chairman, may I point out, and so on, with great flamboyance and wit, that kind of British wit that comes from someone who's a product of an English education. It was always really fun to debate him, and he often said I was his most difficult opponent, but we did a bunch of debates before his untimely death a few years ago of throat cancer.
Yeah, absolutely. And I watched one of those online. Critical race theory, that was one question in advance of the show that someone had asked me to ask you. What are your thoughts on that?
Critical race theory is basically a form of propaganda. It's the progressive doctrine that's been given a highfalutin name. And the point of the progressive doctrine is really to cover up the crimes of the Democratic Party. Now, here's a fact that people don't know. The huge plantation system that we identify with slavery did not really exist at the time of the American founding. And it certainly didn't exist in 1619, the date of the New York Times' fabled 1619 project. There were, in fact, no plantations at that time. Now, after the cotton gin was invented in the 1790s, the plantation system began to spread in the South, and a new party called the Democratic Party arose to defend the slave plantation. So this is the great fact that the left wants to conceal. And how do they do it? By taking the blame for slavery off the Democratic Party, where it belongs, and trying to stick it on just the South or America or the founding. So there's an effort here to displace the true blame. It's kind of like a sleight of hand, if you will, and critical race theory is the kind of glorified name for that sleight of hand.
When you talk about Republicans and the conservative movement and toughening up and, getting a backbone, we see some statesmen, women and men across the nation, whether in the judicial branch, certainly in the legislative branch, and sometimes executive, whether it's a mayor or governor. Our current President Trump would be an example. And you see them standing out thoughtfully, but many others aren't sure what to do. Beyond watching your documentaries and supporting you and listening to programs like this where we interview folks like you, what else can people do? I mean, hopefully you wouldn't say just run for office, because not everybody wants to do that. And toughening up is, I think, a good prod. But what tangibly can they do? Does it start in our universities? Does it start at the dinner table? Does it start at church?
Well, the churches, that now that you mention it, I mean, that is, the left has these big megaphones, which I mentioned earlier, the media, Hollywood, academia. So conservatives have a megaphone, but it's unused. The church, with some exceptions, some notable exceptions, by and large, pastors are scared of the issue of politics. They're very protective of their 501c3 status, and therefore they're quite reluctant to engage political issues, even ones that bear directly upon moral and spiritual issues. So I am very frustrated by that. Now, with regard to people, ordinary people, they should use their social media. They should use their influence. I do think longer term we have to create alternative educational institutions, alternative forms of entertainment, because the left so dominates our culture, and they want to force us to live in that culture, in their culture. And so either we do it, and that means things like subsidizing the undermining of our own values, sending our kids off to colleges where they learn things that subvert our principles. Either we do that, or we create our own institutions, which I think we need to do.
TrumpCardTheMovie.com is where you can get his new documentary, Trump Card. That's its title. Three other questions tied to the presidency, Dinesh. So we had a debate last week. You're such a methodic, thoughtful debater, intellectual debater. When you see folks from both sides interrupting, how did you come away from that debate, and do you think it can get better in the remaining two?
Well, I have one piece of advice for Trump, and that is, Trump alludes to things, but he doesn't explain. So he'll say things like, isn't it true, Joe Biden, that your son Hunter got a $3.5 million check from an oligarch in Moscow? But he doesn't explain further. Now, we do in the movie. If you watch Trump Card, the movie, you'll see that we have an in-depth look at the Biden family racket. And what Trump should have said, I think, is something more like this. Hey, Joe Biden, isn't it interesting that over 47 years you've been in government, and yet you've accumulated a family wealth of $100 million? Now, how did you do that? Didn't you do that by every time you went to a foreign country, you took one of your brothers, James Biden or Frank Biden, or your son Hunter Biden with you, and while you were having official meetings, your family members were cutting side deals with foreign government officials that resulted in large transfers of cash into the Biden family? Is that not a fact? Because, see, that's a description of how Biden's been doing this. The Clintons used a foundation, but Biden gets around the disclosure requirement. See, if he does it, if he gets money, he has to disclose it. But if his son gets money or his brother gets money, there are no disclosure requirements. So Biden's been very cunning over his whole career in making politics into a business. And Trump touched upon that, but he didn't really lay it out.
No, it's true. We have just a couple minutes left with Dinesh D'Souza. Tomorrow night is the big debate, vice presidential, and Mike Pence, certainly formidable debater against Kamala Harris, who in her own right will be tough. Do you think that's going to be one that's going to have a high popularity in watch time? I think so.
I think so, too. And I think it's going to be a very different debate. Now, normally I'd be a little scared for Mike Pence because, see, he's such a nice guy. He's a conventional Republican. He speaks in a soft voice. And sometimes when you're up against someone who's going to play the race card, is going to play the gender card, the typical Republican does not know how to cope with that. They get freaked out. They want to go under the table. So I hope Mike Pence goes in fearlessly, that he's calm and methodical in his normal way, but he's able to put the case against Kamala Harris, and he should not be afraid to make, if you will, the Trumpian argument, although he'll make it in a Pencean way.
Absolutely. We're going to wrap up with this, folks. You can purchase Trump Card, the documentary, from acclaimed, famed filmmaker Dinesh D'Souza. You can go to TrumpCardTheMovie.com. How do you call the presidential race? I think Trump can pull it out, and I think in part because of people like you that take the time and the leadership to get the message out. Is it too early to call, or do you think he can pull it out in early November?
No, I think Trump can pull it out. And I say this really based not upon polls. It's based upon my confidence in the good sense of the American people. I think that the Democrats have overplayed their hand. They've gone a little COVID crazy on us. Their lockdowns are too much. Their approval of all this anarchy in the streets, arson and looting and so on. Even in the name of racial justice, there's a limit, and I think the American public has reached that limit. So bottom line of it, Trump is the president of prosperity and law and order, and plus Biden, I think. I mean, I don't even know how they ended up with such a ridiculous candidate, but they did. And so I think Trump's going to win, and win pretty decisively in November.
I think you're correct. Dinesh D'Souza, the name of the documentary released today on DVD is Trump Card. You can purchase it at TrumpCardTheMovie.com. Purchase it for your family and friends. It's a great Christmas gift. Dinesh, thank you so much for your time. God bless you. Keep up the good work.
Thank you.
Absolutely. This is the Tom Anderson Show.